All right, so I got a message from a patron. His name is Brett, and he writes, "Hi John, I've recently purchased Scion and Planetary Assault Systems mix CDs as recommended by you, thanks. Could you provide a list of your top 50 electronic/ambient/techno albums that you can't find on any streaming platform? That would be incredible. Cheers." Yeah, it would be incredible. If I had that lying around, that list, if I'd actually made that list ever, I mean, of course I haven't, but it gave me an idea. I thought I would do a series of videos about how I got into electronic music, or some of the early releases that I got into, and maybe it will go further than that, and maybe it won't. I don't know. I'm not going to make any promises at this stage. But let's start, and I want to show you the very first electronic music CD that I ever bought, and it's called the Positiva Ambient Collection. Now, Positiva at the time, or certainly subsequently, became a record label for house music. So I think this was quite unusual for them, because this features tracks by The Orb, Infinite Wheel, Black Dog, Orbital. There's a remix of Jesus Jones by Aphex Twin, which sounds nothing like Jesus Jones and everything like Aphex Twin. The Irresistible Force's Sky High, which is a classic, Beaumont Hannant. Polygon Window, which is a alter ego of Richard James, aka Aphex Twin. And some Moby and some Rhythm is Rhythm. And this really set me on a bit of a path. But it wasn't the very first sort of ambient techno, because it was called ambient techno back then. It wasn't called electronica or IDM or anything else. It was called ambient techno, because it wasn't the ambient of the Eno years and Tangerine Dream, but it really wasn't also music for clubs. It was sort of home listening music. And my first exposure to that kind of home listening music was this album a year before, in '92. This is UF Orb by The Orb, and it's their second album. And I really got into a track on this, but it took me a while to buy this or to really click with it. The Blue Room. It's a 7-minute version, but that's not the version I would recommend you hunt down, because this is the version I got into. Because when the UF Orb album came out, it came out as a limited edition 2-CD set with this CD single, or a version of it, as a bonus disc. And this CD single features a 40-minute version of the Blue Room, which is just incredible. And it is kind of a sort of head nod bit of ambient techno. I think it has Steve Hillage on it doing some guitar works and things like that. I'm pretty sure it does. So I think really the Blue Room was my first introduction to ambient techno or electronic music that I really liked. But like I say, it took me a while to kind of really click with it until I bought this compilation, the Positiva Ambient Collection. And then I think a few weeks after this came out, Orbital, whose track here, Halcyon, features on here, it's a single edit of Halcyon, they issued a new single called Lush 3. And it was really cheap in my local CD store, so I went and bought it. Also because it's an enormously long CD single, because there's Lush 3.1, 3.2, and then 3 remixes, one by Underworld, one by the Psychic Warriors of Gaia, and one by CJ Bolland. And we'll get to all of those artists in a subsequent video. I guess Lush 3.1 and 3.2 really do lean into the sort of the club end of ambient techno. This was kind of fairly propulsive, fairly driven electronic music. You would hear it in a club maybe at the time, but this was something I really got heavily into. I think it was in the summer of '93 maybe. I hammered this CD. I think it's fantastic, and the remixes are great as well. So they're all very sort of different versions. This is pretty easy to pick up, I think, for just a few euros on Discogs. UF Orb is easy to get. You can get it on vinyl now. This vinyl was reissued in 2018, I think. So should be able to get that. There was a double CD deluxe edition of UF Orb issued, I think, in 2008. That's a bit harder to get. I don't think it has the 40-minute Blue Room on it either. I think it's got some different remixes. But then, after Positiva, after Orbital's Lush, I was turned on to this album, another album with a green cover. And I think this is deemed as a bit of a classic. This is the first artificial intelligence compilation that came out on Warp. And on the back, it says artificial intelligence is electronic listening music for long journeys, quiet nights, and club drowsy dawns. So this, as you can tell, I think this was meant to be a bit of a spoof on the Maxell ad from the 70s, but drawn with, well, I guess they look fairly horrific now, but drawn with 90s graphics or 90s computer graphics. But this is coming out on vinyl again in 2 weeks for its 30th anniversary. But it's just a wonderful compilation. It features Polygon Window again. That's, as you know, Aphex Twin. It's got Musicology, which is basically B12. We'll come back to B12 in another episode. Auteca, IAO, which is Black Dog. We'll come back to Black Dog. Speedy J, we'll definitely come back to him. Musicology again B12. Up, which is Richie Hawtin. We'll definitely come back to him. Another Auteca track, another Speedy J track. And then bringing it back to the Orb, a very ambient version called Loving You Live by Dr. Alex Patterson, which is essentially the last track on the Ultra World album, but done in a shorter ambient version. This is the only one, I think, this is the only compilation I'm showing today that is available on streaming services. The Positiva Ambient Collection, not on streaming services as far as I know. And some of the tracks on here, I think are pretty hard to find now. They weren't at the time, but they are now. So yeah, that's, I guess, essentially 3 and a bit releases that kick-started my enthusiasm for electronic music. I have to qualify this by saying I don't just listen to electronic music, and obviously I'm looking over there, I can see the Smiths, Fatima Mansions, Flaming Lips, Talking Heads, Suede, Nick Cave, The House of Love, obviously some Neil Young. So I have to remind people of this because they just tend to incorrectly think or assume that all I listen to is bleepy bloopy shit, and that's not true. Anyway, so that's the first video I'm making here about my enthusiasm or how I got into electronic music, and I'll see you in the next one.